right. Hello, and welcome to another episode of EJ Now. My name is John Rigby, and I am the Faith Outreach and Transit Campaign Coordinator at Virginia Interfaith Power and Light. Today we are joined by Faith Walker from RVA Rapid Transit and Elle De La Cancela from the Chesapeake Climate Action Network. How are you both doing today?
Great, excited to be here. Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, excited to talk mobility justice. Thanks again.
Absolutely. All right, before we start today, I'd like to do a very brief land acknowledgement. While we're on a video call and many of us are joining from different places, we want to remind ourselves that we are gathered on the unceded land of the indigenous peoples. I am joining in from so-called Richmond, Virginia, and I am on the land of the Powhatan and Chickahominy peoples. If you're unsure of whose land you're on and want to find out, you can visit native-land.ca. So today on this week's episode, we are focusing on mobility justice. As the world continues to grapple with climate change and environmental disasters, our investment in alternative modes of transportation become all the more important. This week, Virginia Interfaith Power and Light joined other transit organizations across the state to kick off the 2023 Virginia Walkability Action Institute, run by the Virginia Department of Health. How we're allowed to move through and exist in our lived environments is a justice issue, which is why all aspects of mobility justice, including walkability, public transportation, and our built environments, are connected to our environmental justice work here in Virginia. These issues include tailpipe pollution, brown sites, landfills, fossil fuels, health disparities of our vehicle-centered infrastructure, and the direction of how we build our environment in Richmond. Currently, we at Virginia Interfaith Power and Light are focused on extending zero fare in Richmond, overcoming the barriers to investment in bus infrastructure, and increasing vital public transit infrastructure in Richmond, like benches and shelters. These changes will help to undo issues of historic segregation in Richmond and improve walkability, transit, and how we move about our space. So today we are blessed to have with us members of the previous 2022 Virginia Walkability Action Institute. So if y'all can please introduce yourself and let us know a little bit about what your focuses are.
Okay, I'll take it away. If I see Elle pointing at me. Well, my name is Faith Walker. I'm the executive director for RVA Rapid Transit. RVA Rapid Transit is a nonprofit dedicated to advocating for frequent and far-reaching public transportation in the Richmond region. And one of the things that sparked our organization is in 2011, the Brookings Institute did a study where they looked at 100 U.S. cities and they looked at access to jobs by public transportation. Our city ranked 92 out of 100 U.S. cities when it comes to access to public transportation. And so that sparked RV Rapid Transit to mitigate that issue. A lot of people use public transportation in this particular region to get back and forth to work. And one of the key problems that we hear when we're interviewing and having conversations with folks is they don't have access to jobs that lay outside the city. And so our goal is definitely to see more buses go more places. People have dignified places to wait with shelters and benches while they're waiting on the bus. And then last but not least, elevating riders' voices in transit planning and decision making. So all of those efforts can happen where leaders are making those efforts. So with that, I'll turn it over to Elle.
Hey, y'all. My name is Elle De La Cancela. I am the Central Virginia Campaign Coordinator for the Chesapeake Climate Action Network. Forgive me if there's a little bit of background noise or my Wi-Fi cuts in and out. I am up in Fairfax right now, going to be doing some canvassing on mobility stuff up here. I can talk about that later. A little bit about CCAN. So we are a grassroots organization that's been around for 20 years now, that is dedicated exclusively to fighting climate change. We get to work with Virginia Interfaith Power and Light a lot, which has been awesome historically, and have gotten to work with RVA Rapid Transit and Faith more recently as we've turned towards the transportation sector in a huge way. As CCAN, we do a couple of different things. So a lot of our work is just driving down greenhouse gas emissions, right? So that's looking like getting off of fossil fuels entirely, whether that be fighting pipelines or gas plants or the byproducts of like coal ash, and also looking forward towards a just transition, how we're going to usher that in, what it means when we've mandated the closures of coal-fired power plants, and continuing to implement clean energy equitably. Part of that work also looks like 48% of our carbon emissions here in the Commonwealth are tied to the transportation sector. A lot of that is coming from commuting in personal vehicles, single occupancy, right? So working on transportation and driving down emissions can look like a lot of things. It can look like continuing to maintain standards for clean cars, but ultimately that not everybody has access to cars, right? Car ownership is increasingly expensive. And really, if we're going to change what got us into the climate crisis, we need to fundamentally change the way that we think. And that means prioritizing bike walk infrastructure, it means prioritizing public transit, because that is raising the floor for everyone. Electric vehicles kind of blows the ceiling off of the conversation. In addition to like our transportation work, we talk a lot about resiliency work, right? Like flood mitigation, dire heat, things like that. As a C3, C4, we get to utilize a variety of tactics. So there's the Chesapeake Climate Action Network and the Chesapeake Climate Action Network Action Fund. Try to say that like 5 times fast, horrible. But that means that we get to spend a lot of time not only talking to constituents, and working with people on the ground who live along the pipeline routes, who ride the bus every day, but also get to talk to legislators at the State House. It means that we get to do direct action when the need calls for it. So that's a little bit about what we do. And I am a transit-oriented person myself, so getting to work with Faith has been really personally fulfilling, as well as you know, doing some real good to drive down carbon emissions in a way that helps everybody.
Awesome, thank you, Faith and Al. And you all touched on it a bit, but going to the next question, I was wondering how you both see mobility and transit as a justice issue, and going off of that, why walkability is so important, and mobility.
Well, I mean, specifically for the city of Richmond, we have a history of racist practices and things that have arrested the mobility of people who live and work here. And so things like redlining has created a city where majority of Black individuals are forced in an area. And so what happened is, of course, a large portion of brown and Black people would use public transportation, and buses would just stay in the city lines. And so we move forward, but jobs and opportunities have moved outside the city of Richmond into the counties. And now our infrastructure, when it comes to public transportation and people moving out, there's a disconnect. People cannot move up the economic ladder. They're sort of forced. Only about 36% of jobs are available by public transportation in our region. So people who are depending on public transportation only have accessible 36% of jobs in this region. And those jobs can range in a lot of different pays, but of course, they're sort of stuck in this bubble. And so if you wanted a job even if you wanted a job that was on the bus line, but over 50% of the lines that run in our city are hourly routes. So if you need to match your work life and your home life and your travel life together, it's impossible for you to manage that. And so a lot of times people are turning down jobs because either it's not accessible by transit through county lines, or it doesn't provide them a good work-life balance where they can get to a shift in time to be home, pick up kids, to do whatever life happens. And so because of that, those practices, those injustices that happened in the past, whether it was directly related to transportation, it has affected transportation now. And so we need justice. And so the first way to shift this justice around is by investing in public transportation. And so I have a whole lot to say about that, but I'll let Elle comment.
Yeah, Faith, you said a lot of the things that I've been like thinking and mulling over that I was planning on saying as well, in addition to like redlining, right? Urban renewal, especially in the 50s, the creation of a car dependent lifestyle is a direct result of white flight and the establishment of suburbia, right? We have 95 cutting through like Jackson Ward, at least acutely here in Richmond, and we have 195 cutting through the Randolph area, right? And these were previously historically redlined areas, just to kind of refer back to what Faith was saying. I also want to talk, like there are some really key like stats that Faith mentioned, right? 36% of jobs available off the bus line, 54% of GRTC riders make under $25,000 a year. Right? Reliable transportation increases access to all amenities, right? And having that sort of access increases economic status. But not only are we talking about jobs, right? We're talking about folks getting to and from school, which then opens up other doors. We're talking about folks getting to and from work. We're talking about folks getting to and from healthcare, like services, right? Hospitals, appointments. And we're also talking about folks getting to and from any sort of leisure activities, right? When we're reinvesting into a localized economy. When we're talking specifically about walkability, right? Walkability and public transit are married. You get to and from the bus, and that first last mile connection is really key, especially when you have a lacking infrastructure for walkability in this city, right? You see sidewalks that just end. You see sidewalks in great disrepair that makes it hard to navigate if you're differently abled, right? And while all like increasing walkability and public transit makes for happier people, it does something in a global facing way, right? We're reducing emissions. We are changing the way we're like changing our systems into that more localized economy, focusing on local, thinking global, right? And it has very, very tangible public health benefits on the local level. So not just kind of the aggregate of reducing carbon emissions generally and like, trying to mitigate sea level rise, but we're talking about decreasing asthma rates because less cars on the road is less air pollution, right? When we're increasing walkability, we're talking about greater public health because you're moving. You're just moving as a part of your day as opposed to walking down your driveway to your car and then, walking to work. You're forced to engage with your neighbors. And so I think that's something that's really, really cool is that it makes your neighbors again, especially in a way that like COVID has kind of reduced us into pods. Being on the bus and seeing other people creates a greater sense of empathy for the city that you live in. And I think that, if we are to fight for a better world, right, if we are to fight for justice, it has to start from a place of empathy there.
Absolutely. Thank you both so much. And so the next question is, we see all of these issues, but how can residents of Richmond or of Virginia broadly become advocates for better walkability or transit in their neighborhood, their city, where they live?
I think one part is connecting with organizations here. I mean, the three organizations that are on this call, I think definitely you needed to get plugged in. Our goal, one of the things that we realize is that when we want to duplicate ourselves and do this work, the first component is education. Teaching people about what it means and how do you get a bus line extended in your neighborhood? How do you advocate for an actual installation of a bus stop in a shelter? A lot of people don't know where to start. And so since you don't know where to start, you just don't start. And so one of the things that Elle and I have partnered together to do was offer this education. And so we have been engaging bus riders over the last 2 years. Firstly, we engage bus riders at bus stops. And the first thing that people can do is leave a comment, say something, talk about what you're experiencing and let us know what's happening. We are collecting those stories. We would love to share those stories at public meetings, in op-eds, but most importantly on our YouTube page. So we have a writer's voice where we're constantly sharing people's experiences and stories. And so I think stories and storytelling is the number one way where you yourself who are experiencing something, you can share your story so people can be aware. A lot of times things don't happen and people are not inspired, especially decision makers, inspired to make action or make a change, is because they're so disconnected from the day-to-day. And a lot of folks in decision-making power may not personally ride the bus themselves, but by hearing your story, they may spend a little bit more time in figuring out how can we get a line extended in this particular area? How can we advocate for more operators so that we can increase frequency? So I think the first thing that people can do and not be intimidated about stepping up is sharing their story.
Yeah, Faith, you took the words right out of my mouth. I guess to elaborate on that, because it does seem a little bit difficult to know where to start, right? Something that Faith talked about. It's like, oh my gosh, yes, organizations like the three of ours can lay out the steps, but really what it comes down to is following the money, right? Like all of these decisions about transit are coming from budget conversations, are coming at like local board, like city council levels, the whole slew. So you don't need to go and show up like everywhere all the time. There are like key places to do that. So right there, agency board meetings that are going to have budgetary conversations, whether it be about retaining zero fare, right? That's a decision that GRTC board makes. In the same vein, like the city can fork over a matching grant to GRTC. Those are conversations that happen at your city council, like budgetary conversations. After, General Assembly every year, agencies propose their own budgets. You can sit and talk to your agency members, whether it be the DRPT in particular or VDOT, about what they're going to request from the governor. And that happens all throughout the summer, right? And I think that's something that I want to highlight when you're talking about who you're talking to and what sharing your story means, is that transit is an equity issue, like mobility is justice, and that means intersections. So I'm coming at this from a climate perspective, but you can come at this from a land use perspective, right? You can talk about rezoning our city and what does it mean, making clear that good land use practices, that creating density, right? Developing in ways that we are controlling as opposed to being handed down to us by corporations, right? We have a chance to redefine how our city is going to look, how walkable we want to make our cities. All that stuff happens at like in land use planning meetings, whether it's Plan RVA, whether it's city council, whether it's going up into the General Assembly about whether or not they're going to permit accessory dwelling units, right? Or whatever it is. I just think it's good to think broadly about all of the tools in our toolbox to advocate for transit, all of the intersections that transit has in creating like better cities and a better world.
Awesome. Thank you both, Faith and Elle. As we're wrapping up here, I just wanted to leave space and let people know, is there any current initiative you or your organization is working on that you would like to let people know about? Any upcoming events or actions?
Yes. So the next action, well, justice. We were talking about justice, and there's a topic of zero fare happening, and I believe that is justice. That's a policy that says that because service is not up to par. I mean, the accessibility, if you use public transportation in our city, compared to other cities who have a robust transit system, all types of incomes use public transportation. Why? Because it's convenient. You don't want to be stuck in traffic, so you choose public transportation because you can get to work probably faster. And it's conducive to a city that you don't need a vehicle to operate. This city, we are forcing people. If you come here, we basically say you need a vehicle in order to live a productive life. And right now, if you can afford a vehicle, which is $4,000 to $10,000 per year, and Elle mentioned that 54% of bus riders make under 25,000, but those bus riders don't have access to a higher paying job to make more money. And then it's so much things that are layered because the system is not robust, because of redlining, because of white supremacy and racism. So now we have this layer effect, and zero fare is justice. It's saying that it's the right thing to do. Our system is not conducive enough to even charge people for a service. And I think because there has been so many injustices in this region, the first thing people can focus on is zero fare and making sure that justice happens. So what you need to do is you need to give public comment. You need to come to GRTC's board meeting on December 20th at 8 a.m. You can't be late because they start right at 8 a.m. And you need to share why you support zero fare. People are choosing to do different things other than use public transportation because of zero fare. I think we have reached high. GRTC has had the highest ridership than we've had pre-pandemic levels. So more people are riding the bus since the pandemic. Now, what does that mean? Could it be that because fares are free, so people are choosing to leave their vehicles and use the bus because they're saving money in their pocket? That's exactly what we want. And then have people economic status change where they can no longer afford to own and operate a vehicle, so they're forced to ride the bus. So there's so many different things, and we want to know if that's you. Definitely come and share your story. And yeah, so I'll let Elle take over from there.
Yeah, show up to the GRTC board meeting if you can. For sure. I also like to highlight that we are in or about to be in a time where we can look at bigger pots of money, where we can be thinking about like statewide initiatives and how, right? Like there's a general, it's an 80-20 split is what they've called it historically. And it means that historically of all transportation fundings, 80% has gone to fund car infrastructure, thinking primarily about highways. And when I'm saying that, I'm saying like not fix it first highways, like widening I-95 so that way it goes from the sea to the mountains, right? And 20% of that has gone to public transit, rail, buses, things like that. We need to be changing that on its head, and we have an opportunity now, especially coming from like greater federal pots of money that are coming down to the state in our upcoming General Assembly to push for more money going to transit. Sorry about that. I don't know if you could hear the car moving going in the background, but so in this General Assembly, there will be plenty of opportunities to make your voice heard to your representative, right? This is somebody that is representing your district. They are beholden to you as a voter, right? You have the opportunity to vote them out if they're not acting in according to your values or principles. And so there are going to be some coming up. I'll just give like a very sneak preview, particularly about how to make sure that we fund vital infrastructure in this city. And everywhere, shelters, benches, because it is getting hotter, because our climate is changing, right? We're having hotter days, and a little bit of respite from the sun is huge, and it creates a dignified place to wait. So I would keep your eye out for that. General session starts in mid-January. I know that IPL will be doing some lobbying. I know that CCAM will be doing some lobbying. I imagine that we'll be all linking up, Faith included, right? And be presenting that. But that's a space where you can go for the big bucks. And so I encourage you all to do it, to go for it. And there'll, I'm sure, be follow up from IPL on how to make that happen.
Yeah, so we just had a training on how to get involved yesterday evening with lobbying and engaging your legislator, and we'll have another one coming up on January 5th at 7 p.m. right before General Assembly kicks off, so be on the lookout for that. But yeah, with that, Elle, Faith, I wanted to thank you both for joining for this episode and educating us really on the issues that we face, but also the opportunities that are present as if we make our voices heard. So both, and with that, I'll close out the session.
All right. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you, John.
Bye.